Okay, we're back, and presumably you have downloaded that PDF and you've tried analyzing this piece yourself. So let's dive in and take a look at it. Now, the first thing we want to do, like always when we're analyzing a piece, is let's just take a listen to it. And when I listen to it this time through, I'm going to be thinking from like kind of a music theory perspective as I listen. The first thing I want to decide while I'm listening here is what key are we in? So I want to find a chord that sounds like the key that we're in. Now, in most cases, it's going to be the first or last chord, or probably they're the same. But let's just listen and let's think about that while we listen. And let's just get the piece in our head. Here we go. Okay, so looking at our key signature tells us we are possibly in the key of G because it's 1 sharp, and we know that 1 sharp is the key of G major. However, when we listen to it and we find those chords that feel like they could be tonic, like this first chord, we don't necessarily see a G major chord, right? Here's a G pitch, which might throw us off and think, oh, that could be a G major. But let's look at the first 3 notes, E, G, B. If we stack those right on top of each other, we would see an E minor chord. So pretty safe assumption that we're in E minor here, which if you do your relative majors and minors, you would find that E minor has the same key signature as G major. So that is a pretty good bet. So let's call it E minor. Now, what's cool about this arrangement of this piece and makes it fairly easy to analyze is that a lot of these, of the left hand and the piano, the lower staff here, is really laid out in fairly simple chords for us, and that'll tell us pretty much everything we need. So let's just look through this. E, G, B. That is an E minor chord, so that's going to be 1. And in a minor key, we would do a lowercase 1 because it's minor. So lowercase 1. E, G, B, another lowercase 1. Now, when we're now analyzing something, we only really need to put a Roman numeral when it changes. So if we don't put anything here, it means it's still 1. So normally we would not put anything right here. We would just say 1, and then we'd stay on 1. So we wouldn't put anything right there. Here, the chord changes. So let's have a look at that. D, F, and A. Now, what is a D, F sharp? Sorry, D, F sharp, and A. That is a root position D major chord, which in the key of E is 7. Let's really quick just go to, let me do a new file here. Let's just really quick lay out our E minor diatonic chord progression. Oops. Okay. Now, there's no shame in doing that. If you say, okay, I'm in E minor, I want to just write out all my possible chords, that's totally okay. Don't be afraid to do that. And just use this as a reference when we're looking at the piece. So we're right here. D, F, A. Now let's look at our chord progression. Here's D, F sharp A, D, F sharp A. And that is 7. That's a major 7. And that's okay in the minor key. That's perfectly allowed. So we're going to call that 7, capital 7. Right here, D, F, A, still capital 7. That's totally okay. Back to here, C, E, G. Okay, so C, E, G. Let's look at our chart here. Here's a C, E, G. What is that? That is a major 6. And that is also totally okay. So we're going to call that a major 6. But we have a little wrinkle here because we have a note out of key right there. So let's make sure this chord is still a major 6, which it is. That's still a C major. Now D sharp does not occur in C major, nor does it occur in E minor. So how do we explain that D sharp? Well, we kind of just talked about this in the previous section, right? We can easily explain that by saying it's drawn from the harmonic minor scale, because in E minor, the harmonic minor is going to have a raised 7th, which would be D sharp. D sharp is going to be the 7th scale degree. Now remember, we're not talking about chords here. We're talking about scale degrees. So a raised leading tone is what's going to happen. So that would be just the pitch D, and we're going to raise it to a D sharp heading towards that E. So we can explain that with the harmonic minor. We don't need to really do anything different with our analysis here because we're going to call that a non-chord tone. Now non-chord tones, if you remember, we looked at those in some detail in the last class. We're going to look at those again in an upcoming class in more detail, but we introduced those in the last class, and they just mean a note in the melody that is not in the chord. And they happen a lot. They happen all over the place. We've seen a few of them already. Let's look at right here. Here's our 1 chord, E, G, and B. And this note, C, is not in that chord, and that's okay. It's a non-chord tone. So we don't need to worry about it too much. Okay, so we're going to attribute this D sharp to the harmonic minor. That's totally okay. Now let's go here. We have a B, D sharp, and F sharp. We have another out of key note. B, D sharp, and F sharp. So let's go look at our key here. Here's B, D, and F sharp, but they've raised the D. And once again, we know how to explain this because we just looked at it. We would explain this with the melodic minor. Okay, so what we would do in the analysis, so first of all, the melodic minor, quick refresher, means we're raising the 6th and 7th tone, scale degree, of the scale. And that is going to be C sharp and D sharp, these 2 notes, because they're right here also. 6, 7, and then tonic. So if we raise those, that gives us that major 5 chord, right? That's one of the main reasons that we like using the harmonic and melodic minor. Now we may or may not be using the melodic minor at this point because that is the 6th and 7th. I'm kind of jumping ahead. But right now, all we know for sure is that we're using the harmonic minor because we have these D sharps, right? We've got one here, we've got one here, and we've got one here. So harmonic minor is kind of the thing we're doing right now. So that gives us a major 5 chord. Now normally in the key of E minor, we have a minor 5 chord, but this one is a major 5 chord because we borrowed that harmonic minor. So all we're going to really do different here is the Roman numeral we're going to put on here is going to be a major 5. It's going to be a capital 5. Everything else is the same. Now for this spot right here, we would just leave it blank because it's really still the major 5 chord. We don't need to add anything here. And now we repeat pretty much everything again. Everything kind of lines up the same. Here's our 1 chord. Here is our 7 chord. Here is our 6 chord, C, E, G. And then they go to the 5 chord 1/2 bar earlier this time, and then back to the 1 chord. So it's slightly different. All right, let's look at the next section, the B section we would call this, because the harmony changes quite a bit. So this first chord, G, B, D. So G, B, and D, let's look at our chords here. It's a major 3, totally okay. So we're going to call that 3. Now, interesting to note that that major 3 is also 1 in the relative major, right? If we were in the key of G major, this would be 1. So what we want to keep our eye out for here is if we're in the process of transitioning or modulating to the key of G major. If we're leaving E minor, I don't think we are, but that would be kind of a symbol to look out for when we see a big G major chord. It's the big relative major, and that might be a symbol that we're heading over to G major. But we're not in this case. We'll talk more about modulating shortly. So we have a big 3 chord here, D, F, sharp, A. So what's D, F, and A? That's our 7 chord again, totally okay. D, F, and A again. C, E, and G, there's our 6 chord again. So we're really back to this 7-6 progression. And then our B, D sharp, F sharp that we saw above, which is our major 5, right? So all we've really done is it's this almost the same chord progression as the first section, except we put a big G major here instead of the E minor. So we put a major 3 instead of the minor 1, which is cool. That's a cool trick. I get it. Same thing down here, I think. G, B, D. So there's our major 3. Here's our D, F, A. So that's our 7. Here's our 6. And then to the 5, a bar early so that we can end on 1. And then a big low note of 1, E minor. Cool, right? And along the way, we have a couple D sharps and C sharps, which we're going to attribute as non-chord tones, but they are in the scale that we're using because now that we see that C sharp, we can comfortably call this a melodic minor melody, a melody built around the melodic minor. So there you go. Relatively simple, but a nice song in a minor key that takes advantage of the melodic minor, the relative major over here, and a nice chord progression to boot.